I always thought Clara was the kind of woman who could light up a room without even trying. Her laugh was like music, soft, lilting, the kind that made you feel warm inside. We'd been married for 8 years, and I still couldn't believe she'd chosen me. I'm an ordinary guy, Thomas Grayson, a high school history teacher with a receding hairline and a wardrobe full of sensible brown sweaters. Clara, though, she was extraordinary. A graphic designer with a wild streak. Her auburn hair always a little messy. Her green eyes sharp and playful. We lived in a cozy house in Portland, surrounded by fir trees and the hum of a quiet life. Or so I thought. Started small, the cracks I didn't see at first. She'd come home late from client meetings, her phone buzzing more than usual. I'd ask how her day was, and she'd give me that distracted smile, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Fine, Tom," she'd say, brushing me off. I didn't push. I trusted her. That was my first mistake. One evening, I was grading papers in the living room when she burst in, breathless, her cheeks flushed. "I'm meeting a friend for drinks," she said, barely looking at me as she grabbed her coat. "Don't wait up." I nodded, pen hovering over a student's essay about the French Revolution. The door slammed, and I sat there, staring at the page, wondering why friend sounded so hollow. The next morning she was different, giddy almost. She hummed while making coffee, her fingers dancing over her phone as she typed furiously. I asked who she was texting. "Just work," she said, too quickly. I let it slide. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband. But that night I couldn't sleep. Her side of the bed was cold, and her phone, left on the nightstand, glowed with a notification. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The message was from Alex. Just a winking emoji and the words, "Last night was unforgettable." My stomach dropped. Alex. I knew that name. Alex Harper, her old college friend. A photographer with a smug grin and a reputation for charm. He'd moved to Portland a year ago, and Clara had mentioned him in passing, casual, like he was no big deal. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, until the words blurred. She'd lied to me, and not just once. I didn't confront her that night. Couldn't. I needed proof, something concrete to hold on to before I tore our life apart. So I waited, watching her like a hawk, every laugh and glance now suspect. She didn't notice. Clara was too caught up in whatever she was hiding. The days that followed were torture. I'd wake up to her slipping out of bed, her movements quiet but deliberate, like she was afraid of waking me. She'd shower longer than usual, the steam creeping under the bathroom door, and emerge with a towel wrapped tight, avoiding my eyes. I'd ask how she slept, and she'd mumble something vague before disappearing into her phone again. I started keeping a mental log. Every late night, every excuse, every time she smiled at a text that wasn't from me. I decided to dig deeper. It wasn't hard to find Alex Harper online. His Instagram was a gallery of artsy shots, moody landscapes, half-lit portraits, and there, buried in the grid, a photo of Clara. She was laughing, her head thrown back, sitting on a bar stool with a drink in hand. The caption read, "Catching up with an old soul." It was posted 3 weeks ago, the night she'd said she was at a work event. My chest tightened. I scrolled further, finding more hints, cryptic comments, tag locations that matched her client meetings. It was a puzzle, and I was piecing it together too fast. I needed more than social media breadcrumbs. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her laptop. She'd left it open on the kitchen table one morning, rushing out with a vague excuse about a deadline. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keys. This wasn't me. I wasn't the guy who snooped, but I wasn't the guy who got betrayed either, or so I'd thought. Her email was a goldmine. Messages from Alex, dozens of them, stretching back months. They started innocent, reminiscing about college, joking about old professors. Then they shifted. "Missed you last night," one read. "You're still the wildest girl I know," said another. My hands shook as I scrolled, the dates aligning with her late nights. There were photos too, selfies of them at a bar, her arm around his neck, his lips close to her ear. I felt sick, but I kept going. The worst was an email from 2 days ago. "Can't stop thinking about you," Alex wrote. "Tom doesn't suspect a thing, does he?" Her reply, "He's clueless. Let's keep it that way." Clueless. That word hit me like a punch. I sat there, staring at the screen, the house silent except for the hum of the fridge. My wife, my Clara, wasn't just drifting. She was gone. I closed the laptop, my mind racing. Confronting her wasn't enough anymore. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted her to feel what I felt. The gut-wrenching betrayal, the humiliation. I didn't know how yet, but I'd make her pay. I started planning. Not confrontation, not yet, that was too simple, too quick. Clara didn't deserve a clean break. She'd played me for months, maybe longer, and I'd been the fool, grading papers while she laughed with Alex Harper. No, this needed to be deliberate, something that cut deeper than words. I spent hours awake that night, the glow of my phone lighting up the dark bedroom as she slept beside me, oblivious. First, I needed to know everything. I couldn't trust her emails alone. People lie in writing too. So I borrowed a trick from a colleague who'd caught his kids sneaking out. I installed a tracking app on her phone. It was easy. Slipped in while she showered the next morning. She didn't notice, too busy humming and texting. By noon, I had her location pinged to a cafe downtown. I drove by, casual as I could manage, and there she was through the window. Clara, her hair loose, leaning across the table toward Alex. He was smirking, his hand brushing hers. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, then drove off before I did something stupid. The app became my lifeline. It mapped her lies. Lunch dates labeled meetings. Evenings at Alex's apartment under the guise of working late. I cross-referenced it with her emails, building a timeline. They'd been meeting twice a week, sometimes more, for at least 4 months. For months of me cooking dinner alone, of her kissing me goodnight with someone else's taste on her lips. The thought made my skin crawl. I didn't stop there. I called in a favor from a friend, Mike, who worked IT at a local firm. "Hypothetical question," I said over beers. "How'd you catch someone cheating if you didn't want them to know?" He grinned, oblivious to my stakes, and walked me through hacking basics. Accessing deleted texts, tracing call logs. I took notes, my mind already spinning. That night, I got into her phone's backups. The texts were worse than the emails. Flirty, intimate, things I couldn't unsee. "You're my escape," she'd written to him once. Escape from what? Me? I started shadowing her too, careful not to get caught. One evening, I followed her to a bar on the east side. She met Alex there, and I watched from across the street as they disappeared into a booth, her hand on his thigh. I didn't go in. Couldn't. But I took photos, grainy, time-stamped evidence. It wasn't enough to just know anymore. I needed a weapon. The revenge took shape slowly, a dark seed growing in my mind. I didn't want to just leave her. That was too easy, too painless. Clara had to feel the weight of what she'd done. Not just to me but to us, to the life we'd built. I started small, testing her, seeing how far her lies stretched. "How was your day?" I'd ask, knowing she'd been with Alex. "Oh, busy," she'd say, smiling like nothing was wrong. Each lie fueled me, sharpened my resolve. I decided to hit her where it hurt most, her reputation. Clara prided herself on her career, her creative integrity. She freelanced for big clients, built a name for herself in Portland's design scene. Alex, too, had his own circle, artsy types who worshipped his lens. I'd ruin them both, but her first. I started by digging into her work. She'd been sloppy lately, missing deadlines, blaming stress. I found her client list on her laptop, cross-checked it with her excuses. Half the time she'd said she was working, she'd been with him. I contacted one of her clients anonymously, a small boutique agency she'd been designing a campaign for. "Check her recent submissions," I emailed from a burner account. "She's been recycling old work." It wasn't true, not entirely, but I'd seen enough of her files to know she'd cut corners. The agency replied, asking for proof. I sent doctored screenshots, subtle edits to make it look like she'd plagiarized. They fired her within a week. She came home crying, ranting about unfairness. And I played the supportive husband, hiding my smirk. Next, I turned to Alex. His photography gigs relied on trust, clients who paid for his vision. I created fake profiles on forums, posting rumors about him overcharging, botching shoots. I leaked a few of his emails, ones I'd hacked, where he bragged about juggling women, Clara included. The whispers spread. His bookings dried up. He texted her about it, panicked, and I watched her fret over her phone, oblivious to my hand in it. But that was just the warm-up. I wanted her to lose more, her friends, her pride. I started planting seeds, casual comments to our mutual circle. Clara's been so distant lately, I'd say, feigning worry. I hope she's okay. They'd nod, concerned, and I'd let the silence do the rest. She didn't notice the shift, too wrapped up in Alex. Perfect. By now, I was a ghost in my own marriage. There, but unseen, plotting while Clara spun her web of deceit. Her career was crumbling, her lovers too, and she still thought I was the clueless husband she'd mocked in her emails. I kept up the act, cooking dinners she barely touched, asking about her day with a smile I'd practiced in the mirror. She'd ramble about work stress, never suspecting I'd lit the match. I escalated. Her friends were next. We had a tight group, people we'd known since our early days together, dinners and game nights filling our weekends. I invited them over, just a casual thing, while Clara was out with a client. I poured wine, let my guard down just enough. I don't know what's going on with her, I said, voice low, eyes on my glass. She's barely here anymore. They pressed, worried, and I shrugged, letting them fill in the blanks. Maybe it's nothing, I added, but the doubt was planted. The next week, I took it further. I accidentally left my phone out during a coffee run with Sarah, Clara's best friend. On it, a photo I'd staged, Clara and Alex at that bar, cropped just enough to look innocent unless you knew. Sarah saw it, her brow furrowing. "Who's that guy?" she asked. I sighed, playing reluctant. "Just a friend, I think. She's been spending a lot of time with him." Sarah didn't push, but I saw the gears turning. Word spread. Clara started getting texts, concerned ones at first, then colder. She complained about it one night, confused. "Why's everyone acting weird?" I shrugged. "No idea, hon." Her world was shrinking, and I wasn't done. I hacked Alex's email again, found a thread where he'd bragged about their getaways to a mutual friend. I forwarded it to Clara's sister, Emily, with a note. "Found this. Thought you should know." Emily called her the next day, furious, and Clara stormed in, pale and shaken. "Why's Emily asking about Alex?" she demanded. I played dumb, heart racing. "Alex? Your college buddy? What's she on about?" She stammered, backtracking, and I let her squirm. The real blow was still coming. I'd saved the best or worst for last. I'd been collecting everything, texts, photos, emails, locations. A dossier of her betrayal. I wasn't going to show her, not yet. I had a better idea. She'd built her life on lies. I'd dismantle it piece by piece, and she'd never see me coming. The house felt like a stage now, every moment a performance. Clara was unraveling, though she tried to hide it. Her hands fidgeted more, her smiles were forced, and she'd started pouring herself wine most nights, muttering about stress. I watched her from the corner of my eye, grading papers I barely read, my mind fixed on the next move. She thought her world was crumbling by chance. Lost clients, distant friends, a furious sister. She didn't know I was the architect. I decided to turn up the heat. Alex was still in the picture, though his texts to her had grown desperate. Fewer flirty quips, more complaints about his failing career. I'd already dented his reputation, but I wanted him paranoid, isolated. I used a burner phone to send him anonymous messages. "I know what you're doing with her. Watch your back." Simple, vague, enough to rattle him. He texted Clara about it the next day. I saw the message pop up while she was in the shower. "Some creep's harassing me," he wrote. "You getting anything weird?" She replied, "No, just family drama. Stay safe." I smirked. Stay safe. He wouldn't. Meanwhile, I worked on Clara's social circle. Our friends were already whispering, thanks to my nudges, but I needed them to cut her off completely. I invited a few over for dinner, Mark and Lisa, a couple we'd known forever. Clara was out again, so it was just us. I cooked pasta, kept it light, then let slip a heavier truth. "She's barely around anymore," I said, twirling my fork. "I found some stuff, texts, photos. I don't know what to think." Lisa's eyes widened. Mark leaned in. "With who?" he asked. I hesitated, then named Alex, playing the broken husband. They promised to keep it quiet, but I knew they wouldn't. Gossip spreads like wildfire. The fallout hit fast. Clara came home from a meeting 2 nights later, her face tight. "Lisa called," she said, voice sharp. "Asked if I was okay, like I'm some fragile mess." "What did you tell her?" I shrugged, chopping carrots for stew. "Just that you've been busy." "Why's she worried?" She glared, suspicious, but didn't push. She couldn't, her guilt was a cage and I held the key. I wasn't done with Alex either. I dug into his past, found an old DUI he'd buried, public record, easy to unearth. I tipped off a local art blog anonymously. Check Harper's history before booking him. They ran a snarky piece and his last few clients bailed. Clara ranted about it over breakfast, oblivious to my role. "He's getting screwed over," she said, stabbing her toast. "It's unfair." I nodded, sipping coffee, hiding the thrill in my chest. Clara's life was a house of cards now, and I was pulling them out one by one. Her sister, Emily, stopped calling after their fight. Emily's silence was louder than words. Friends grew distant. Dinner invites dried up. She'd scroll her phone at night, frowning at the lack of replies, and I'd watch, pretending to read a book. "Everyone's so busy lately," she'd mutter. I'd hum agreement, masking my satisfaction. She was alone, and she didn't even know why. I shifted focus to her finances. Clara's freelance income was her lifeline. Without it, she'd lean on me, and I wasn't about to let that happen. I'd already cost her 1 client, but she had others, smaller fish clinging to her talent. I went after them too. Using fake accounts, I emailed 2 more boutique brands she'd bragged about, claiming she'd missed deadlines, sent subpar work. I attached forged proofs subtle enough to pass scrutiny. One dropped her within days. The other asked for a meeting. She fumbled, too distracted to defend herself. Her bank account, linked to mine, showed the damage, freelance deposits trickling to nothing. She hid it at first, but I saw the signs. Fewer trips to her favorite cafe, a hesitation before buying groceries. "Money's tight," she admitted one night, staring at her wine glass. "I might need help with bills." I nodded, calm as ever. "We'll figure it out," I said, knowing I'd cut that rope soon too. I'd been siphoning our joint savings into a separate account. Small transfers she wouldn't notice yet. She'd built her independence on lies. I'd let her fall without a net. Alex was cracking too. My burner texts had him jumpy. He'd changed his number, but I found it through Clara's phone. I upped the ante, sending a photo I'd snapped of them outside his apartment. No message attached. He called her in a panic. I overheard her side of it from the hallway. "It's just a prank," she insisted, voice trembling. "No one knows." She was wrong. I knew, and soon everyone would. I started laying the groundwork for the big reveal. I printed her emails, her texts, the photos, hundreds of pages, a paper trail of betrayal. I didn't show her, not yet. Instead, I hid them in a locked box under the guest bed, waiting for the right moment. She'd see it all, but not before I'd stripped everything else away. Clara's confidence was fraying, and I reveled in it. She'd always been bold, unshakable. Now she jumped at shadows, checked her phone obsessively, snapped at me over nothing. "You left the lights on again," she'd bark, as if I'd ruined her day. I'd apologize, meek and mild, letting her think she still had control. She didn't. I'd taken her career, her friends, her money. Next was her pride. I targeted her public image. Clara loved attention. Instagram was her stage, filled with artsy shots and witty captions. I created a dozen fake accounts, subtle at first, liking her posts, leaving vague comments like, "Beautiful work." Then I flipped it. "Heard she's not who she seems." One wrote under a photo of her sketching. Check her references. Another posted. Her followers, clients, peers started asking questions. She deleted the comments, but the damage stuck. Trolls, she grumbled to me, pacing the kitchen. They're everywhere. I nodded, stirring soup, my face a mask. Alex's world was collapsing too. The DUI story spread. His smug artist persona couldn't weather it. I hacked his portfolio site, swapped a few images with blurry messes, and emailed his last clients from his account. Sorry, can't deliver. They dumped him, and he texted Clara. Frantic. I'm done, he wrote. This city hates me. She tried to soothe him. I saw her type it, but her words were hollow. She was sinking with him. I pushed our friends further away. At a bar with Mark and Lisa, I let more slip. Found a hotel receipt, I said, voice low. She said it was a work trip, but I trailed off, letting them connect the dots. Lisa gasped. Mark swore under his breath. You deserve better, Lisa said, squeezing my arm. I shrugged, playing the martyr. They stopped texting Clara altogether. She noticed, whining about it one night. What's their problem? She asked. No clue. I lied, scrubbing a pan. The locked box under the bed grew heavier. Every lie she told, every secret I uncovered, added to it. I caught her whispering to Alex on the porch one night, recorded it on my phone. Tom's so boring, she'd said, laughing. Boring. That stung, but it fueled me. She'd regret that word. Clara was a shell now, clinging to scraps of her old life. Her phone barely buzzed. Friends gone. Clients lost. Alex a wreck. She'd sit on the couch, staring at nothing, wineglass in hand. Everything's falling apart, she said once, voice small. I wanted to laugh, to scream, but I played the concerned husband. We'll get through it, I said, patting her shoulder. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either. She was too lost to notice me circling. I cut deeper. Our house, her sanctuary, was next. She'd always loved it, the hardwood floors, the big windows. I started small. Missed a mortgage payment. Blamed a bank error. She didn't check. She trusted me with that stuff. I let it lapse again. Forged a late notice. Left it where she'd see it. Tom, what's this? She asked, waving the paper, eyes wide. I'll fix it, I said, calm as ever. I didn't. The bank called a week later. She answered, pale as she hung up. They're threatening foreclosure, she whispered. I feigned shock. How'd that happen? She didn't know I drained our savings. Left us dangling. Alex tried to pull her back in. I saw his texts begging her to meet. I intercepted one, replying from her phone while she slept. I need space. He stopped texting. She woke up confused, checking her messages. He's ghosting me, she said, hurt. I shrugged. Maybe he's busy. She didn't suspect I'd severed that thread. Her isolation was nearly complete. I spread one last rumor, called Emily, fake tears in my voice. I think she's seeing someone, I said. I found proof. Emily, already furious, exploded. Texted Clara a tirade, cut her off for good. Clara sobbed that night, locked in the bathroom. I listened through the door, cold and still. The box under the bed was ready. I'd show her soon. Every lie, every betrayal laid bare. But first, I'd take the last thing she had left. Her hope. Clara was breaking, and I savored every crack. She'd stopped fighting the chaos, resigned, almost, to the wreckage I'd built. The house was a mess, bills piling up, her phone silent. She'd shuffle around in sweatpants, hair unwashed, muttering about bad luck. I kept up the act. Cooked meals, paid just enough bills to keep the lights on. Asked how she was holding up. I don't know, she'd say, staring at the wall. I'd nod, hiding the storm inside me. I finished Alex off. His apartment lease was month to month. I'd found the landlord's contact in his hacked emails. Posing as a concerned neighbor, I reported fake noise complaints, late rent. The landlord didn't care about truth. He evicted Alex within weeks. Clara got the call. He was moving, leaving Portland. He didn't even say goodbye. she said, voice hollow. I'd made sure he couldn't. Blocked her number from his phone during one of her naps. She was alone now, truly alone. The foreclosure notice came, real this time. I'd let it happen, watched her panic as she read it. We're losing the house? She asked, tears streaking her face. I thought you fixed it. I sighed, playing helpless. I tried, Clara. Money's gone. She didn't ask where. Didn't know I'd hidden it. She just sank into the couch, defeated. I'd taken her home, her last anchor. I invited our old friends over one last time, Mark, Lisa, a few others. Clara stayed upstairs, too ashamed to face them. I didn't push her down. Instead, I poured wine, let my voice crack. She's leaving me. I lied, eyes down. Found out she's been with someone else. They gasped, hugged me, promised support. Her loss, Lisa said. I nodded, grateful. While upstairs, Clara hid from a truth she didn't know I'd shaped. The box was the finale. Late that night, after they left, I carried it downstairs. Clara was on the couch, wineglass empty. What's that? She asked, squinting. I set it down, unlocked it, and started pulling out papers, emails, texts, photos, recordings. Her eyes widened as I spread them across the table. You've been busy, I said, voice low, steady. She froze, mouth open, as the weight of it hit her. Clara's face went white as I laid out the evidence. Page after page, a gallery of her deceit staring back at her. The emails fluttered to the table. The photos landed with soft thuds, and the recordings sat there, silent but screaming. She didn't move at first, just stared, her breath shallow. Tom, she whispered, voice cracking. What is this? I didn't answer right away. I let her stew in it, let the silence press down on her like a weight she couldn't lift. You tell me, I said finally, leaning back in my chair, arms crossed. You're the one who's been living it. She reached for a photo, her and Alex at that bar, his arms slung around her shoulders, and her hand trembled. This isn't. I didn't. She stammered, but the words died as she flipped through the texts, her own words mocking her. Tom's clueless. One read. He's so boring. Another. She dropped the paper like it burned, her eyes darting to me, wide and pleading. I can explain, she said, but it was weak, hollow, a reflex more than a defense. I laughed. A short, bitter sound that made her flinch. Explain? Clara, I've got months of this. Months of you and Alex laughing behind my back. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out, and she sank back onto the couch, clutching the cushion like it could save her. It wasn't like that, she said, tears spilling now, streaking her face. He was just... I was lonely, Tom. You were always working, always so distant. I clenched my jaw, the excuse slicing through me. Lonely. After 8 years, she'd turned me into the villain to justify her betrayal. Don't, I said, voice low, sharp. Don't you dare put this on me. I played the recording next, her voice, clear as day, giggling on the porch. Tom's so boring. Alex's laugh followed, smug and grating. She gasped, hands flying to her mouth, but she couldn't look away. How did you? She started, then stopped, realization dawning. You've been watching me? I nodded, slow and deliberate. Since I found out. Since you made me a fool. Her sobs came harder, but I felt nothing. No pity, no softness. She'd hollowed me out, and now it was her turn. The box wasn't empty yet. I pulled out the last piece. A timeline I'd written, dates and lies mapped out like a battle plan. For months, I said, tossing it at her feet. That's how long I know about. How long were you planning to keep this up? She didn't answer, just cried, her shoulders shaking. I stood, towering over her. You're done, Clara. Everything you had, gone. And I made sure of it. She didn't sleep that night. I heard her pacing upstairs, the floor creaking under her restless steps. I stayed in the living room, the evidence still spread across the table like a crime scene. I didn't clean it up. I wanted her to see it every time she passed, a reminder she couldn't escape. Morning came gray and heavy, the air thick with rain outside. She shuffled down, eyes red, hair tangled, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Tom," she said, voice hoarse. "We need to talk." I didn't look up from my coffee. "You've said enough?" I replied, stirring the spoon slowly, the clink against the mug the only sound. She hovered by the table, hands twisting together. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I messed up, I know that." I set the mug down, meeting her gaze for the first time. "Sorry doesn't undo it, Clara. Sorry doesn't make me forget waking up alone while you were with him." Her lip trembled, but she nodded, like she knew words were useless now. She tried to shift gears. "What happens now?" she asked, glancing at the foreclosure notice pinned under a photo of her and Alex. "The house. Us. What are you going to do?" I leaned back, letting the question hang. "The house is gone," I said flatly. "Bank's taking it next month. As for us, there's no us anymore." Her breath hitched, and she sank into a chair, hands covering her face. "You can't mean that," she said through her fingers. "We can fix this. Counseling, something." I stood, walking to the table, and picked up an email. Alex's words about her being wild. "Fix this," I said, holding it up. "You threw us away for him. For this." I dropped it, letting it flutter down. "I've already fixed it, Clara. Your clients, your friends, your money, I took them. You've got nothing left." Her head snapped up, confusion cutting through the tears. "What do you mean, you took them?" I smiled, cold and slow. "Figure it out. You're smart, aren't you?" She didn't speak for a long moment, just stared at the mess between us. Then, quietly, "You ruined me." I nodded. "You ruined us first." She flinched but didn't argue. The fight was gone from her, drained by the truth I'd laid bare. I turned away, grabbing my coat. "I'm going out," I said. "Don't be here when I get back." She didn't move as I left, the door slamming behind me. I drove aimlessly for hours, rain streaking the windshield, the city blurring past. I didn't feel triumph, not yet. It was more like a hollow relief, the kind that comes after a long sickness finally breaks. Clara's face kept flashing in my mind. Those wide, broken eyes as she realized how far I'd gone. I'd wanted her to hurt, and she did, but it didn't fill the hole she'd left. Not yet. I stopped at a diner, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and sat there, replaying every step I'd taken to bring her down. When I got back, the house was quiet. She'd listened. Her car was gone, her clothes missing from the closet. The evidence was still on the table, untouched, a monument to what we'd been. I sat there, staring at it until the light faded outside. Then I started packing. Not much, just my books, my sweaters, the things she'd never cared about. The bank could have the rest. I'd already rented a small place across town, paid with the savings I'd hidden. She'd never find me. I called Mark later, told him it was over. "She's gone," I said, keeping it simple. He didn't ask for details, just offered a beer and a couch if I needed it. I thanked him, hung up, and kept packing. The next day, I heard from Lisa. Clara had shown up at their place, crying, begging for a place to stay. "She said you kicked her out," Lisa told me, voice cautious. "Said she messed up bad." I didn't deny it. "She did," I said. "She can figure it out." Lisa didn't push, but I knew they wouldn't take her in, not after what I told them. Clara texted me that night, a single line, "I'm sorry. Please talk to me." I didn't reply. I blocked her number, deleted her from my life like she tried to delete me from hers. She'd have to face the wreckage alone. Her sister wouldn't help, her friends were gone, and Alex was a ghost. I'd made sure of that. The thought brought a flicker of satisfaction, faint but growing. I moved out the next morning, left the key in the mailbox. The house could rot for all I cared. It wasn't home anymore. I drove to my new place, a cramped apartment with bare walls and a view of nothing. It was enough. I'd rebuild, piece by piece, without her shadow over me. Weeks passed, and the silence was deafening. No Clara, no calls, no echoes of her laugh in the halls. My new place was sparse. A bed, a desk, a shelf of books, but it was mine. I went back to teaching, threw myself into lessons about revolutions and betrayals, irony not lost on me. Students noticed I was sharper, more focused. "You okay, Mr. Grayson?" one asked after class. I nodded, smiled. "Better than ever," I said, and meant it. Word trickled back about Clara through the grapevine. Mark and Lisa, mostly, who couldn't resist updates. She'd crashed with a distant cousin for a while, then moved into a cheap rental downtown. No design work, no clients. She was waiting tables now, scraping by. "She looks rough," Mark said over beers one night. "Keeps asking about you." I shrugged, sipped my drink. "She made her bed." He didn't argue. No one did. They'd picked sides, and it wasn't hers. Alex was gone. Left Portland entirely, last anyone heard. Some said he'd moved to Seattle. Others claimed he'd crashed with his parents, tail between his legs. I didn't care where he landed, as long as it was far from me. I'd check his old Instagram sometimes just to see the wreckage. Posts deleted, followers down to a handful. My anonymous work had stuck. Good. Clara tried reaching out once more. An email slipped through before I could block her new address. "I know I hurt you," it read. "I hate myself for it. Can we just talk?" I stared at it, fingers hovering over the keyboard, then deleted it. Talking wouldn't change the past, wouldn't erase the nights I'd lain awake while she was with him. She'd lost that right. I started healing, slow but sure. Met a woman at the school, Ellen, a math teacher with a dry wit and no nonsense. We'd chat over coffee in the lounge, nothing heavy, just easy. She didn't know my story, didn't need to. I wasn't ready for more, but it was a start. A crack of light after the dark. Clara's shadow was fading, and I was clawing my way back to myself. Months later, I saw Clara again. By chance, not choice. I was downtown, grabbing a sandwich, when she stepped out of a diner across the street. She was thinner, her hair dull, apron tied loose around her waist. She didn't see me at first, just lit a cigarette and stared at the pavement, smoke curling around her. I froze, sandwich halfway to my mouth, watching her like a stranger. Then her eyes flicked up, met mine, and time stopped. She hesitated, then crossed the street, slow, like she wasn't sure she should. "Tom," she said when she reached me, voice soft, tired. I didn't say anything, just waited, letting her fill the silence. "I didn't expect to see you," she went on, shifting her weight. How are you?" I set the sandwich down, wiped my hands on a napkin. "Fine," I said, clipped. "You?" She laughed, a brittle sound. "Not great, but you probably knew that." I didn't deny it. She looked down, scuffing her shoe against the curb. "I know you hate me," she said. "I don't blame you. What I did, it was awful. She stopped, swallowed hard. "I miss you, even after everything." I studied her, the lines on her face, the weight she carried now. Part of me wanted to soften, to say something kind. But that part was buried under months of her lies, her laughter with Alex, her dismissal of me. "You don't get to miss me," I said, voice steady. "You threw me away, Clara. I just made sure you felt it." Her eyes welled up, but she nodded, like she'd expected it. "I'm sorry," she whispered, one last time, then turned and walked back to the diner, shoulders hunched. I watched her go, waited until she disappeared inside, then picked up my sandwich and left. That night, I burned the box. Every paper, every photo, every scrap of her betrayal. The flames ate it all, ash drifting into the dark. I stood there, watching it go, feeling the last of her slip away. I didn't need revenge anymore. I'd taken it, wielded it, and now I was free. The next day, I asked Ellen out for coffee. She said yes, and I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. Clara was the past. I was done.